Hi everyone, this is CricketSong with Lunar Wisdom and you're watching The Sacred Circle. We broadcast live every Friday at 2 p.m. Eastern Standard Time for 60 minutes. We haven't been on for a month, all of July, so if you're looking at the playlist on my channel and you can't find the other Sacred Circles that were broadcast, it's because there was none. I had family visiting from another state and just was unable to have a sacred circle. But today I'm here with my usual co-host,
LippyWitch.
Yay! And we have our special guest, Lailoken, with us today. Hello.
Hello.
Yay. Today we're going to be talking about the Wiccan Rede, the threefold law, and ethics in a general sense of Wicca and or witchcraft.
We're going to try to get through all the rules in Wicca.
I know. There's a lot. I mean, it's going to be really difficult. We may have to do this as a 2- or 3-part series. I hope you're ready to come back for that.
I'm sensing sarcasm, very heavy sarcasm.
Well, if we just cover the North American rules, I think we'll be okay.
There you go. Right. So I guess, we can get right. Oh, so if you are one of the viewers, because we do have live viewers, hey, welcome. If you have questions, I have the Q&A application ready. So feel free to type in your questions, and I'll make sure we get to your question in regards to our topic. So don't be shy. Feel free to just jump in with your questions. And I do want to state, at least for me, when we have this discussion, it's my personal interpretation. For my opinion, when I do state my opinion, it's my opinion, my interpretation, because I know sometimes interpretations can get kind of messy, I guess. I don't know. All right, so what do you think? The origin of the Wiccan Rede. And when I talk about the Wiccan Rede, I am talking about "and it harm none, do what you will."
Mm-hmm.
Where does that originate from?
Yes. Well, so the Wiccan Rede, "and it harm none, do what you will." It kind of like an evolution. This is my understanding of it, and it's an evolution of Gerald Gardner wrote a book called The Meaning of Witchcraft. I think it's The Meaning of Witchcraft. I actually probably should have prepped for this. But in The Meaning of Witchcraft, he talks about ethics of witches. And back in his day, witches included Wiccans. So I'm going to be interchanging those words a lot, especially when I talk about like 1990. So back then, he was talking about witch ethics, and he was saying that basically witches really have only one rule, and that is what good King Pasal said, which was, do what you want, just don't harm anyone. You know, something to that effect. I'm paraphrasing it. And so that became pretty much the standard only ethic of his form of witchcraft. And that was that as long as you don't harm anybody, do what you want to do and enjoy it. And later on, it kind of evolved, and then Dorian Valiente wrote out a whole long poem to it and ended it with, "and it harm none, do what you will." And that part of the long poem that she wrote out caught on, and it became the Wiccan Rede. And I really laugh when people take it literally, because there's no possible way you can not harm and survive. You're always going to harm something, and it's just the way it is. And there's also necessary harm that one must do. Like, let's say if you're a surgeon, you have to harm in order to remove something or hurt somebody, you know?
I do.
Yeah.
Because
so,
my question for you was, how do you interpret that? And you've already answered that. Because, you know, my next question is, when I discuss "and it harm none, do what you will" with people, we come up to, well, how do you define harm?
right.
And then, but if you are going to take it literally, then how can you do anything? Because we breathe, we harm the organisms in the air when we suck them in our nose. You know what I mean? When
Yeah.
we eat, we cause harm. Even if you're not, even if you're going to say you're only vegetarian and you don't eat living animals, but you eat living vegetables. I mean, you're not going to eat a rotten vegetable, are you?
Right, right. And
Well, some might.
well, somebody might, yeah. I mean, you might be in a situation where that's all you have to eat.
Give
You
it
know?
to
True.
And I
True.
think, you know, the thing that always gets me is that we have ethics and morals. We grow up with those. And, you know, I did one video where it was one of those public service announcement videos where I was joking about the Wiccan Rede. And it's like, well, first of all, throw all of your morals and ethics out the window. All you have to worry about is the Wiccan Rede. That's not the way that people do things. And the Rede itself is just a guideline. It's a suggestion. It's a way to kind of look at things and assess them. But whatever morals you grow up with are the morals that you have. And I think that it's just kind of a carryover from our Christian background where we have to look towards morals and ethics within our belief system. And I think if your morals come from your beliefs and not from your upbringing, something's seriously wrong with your upbringing.
Well,
You know?
I was just going to say, I know, and I am close to a few people who had pretty shitty upbringings. And if they were going to really look at their family dynamic for their morals and ethics, it wouldn't lead for a very fruitful and joyous life for them because they really fucked up families. So
But
I think
they probably have their own morals and ethics.
They
They're
do.
probably not running around robbing and killing people, are they?
no, they're not. Well, not anymore.
You're like, well, maybe. Okay.
I know I'm not Wiccan, and I don't necessarily follow the Rede. I get what it stands for. How I interpret it is, don't be a purposeful jackass, and you're okay. Don't actively be a dick to people. That's kind of more how I interpret that, unless they deserve it. And I wasn't raised in a Christian household at all. I mean, my parents were raised Catholic. They're like, no, they're hippies, and they were just like, you believe what you want. We'll support whatever you want to follow. We're not going to judge, and we're not going to force you to follow anything. And I was raised in a really, really healthy, moral-esque, ethical household, and I certainly take that into my adulthood. But I've also created my own personal morals and ethics to kind of go by that. May differ a little bit, or extremely, or not even agree at all with my upbringing. But you know, as you get older, you kind of base what your knowledge is from childhood, and then interpret it in your own way as an adult.
Mm-hmm.
That's my.
So, in regards to the phrase "and it harm none, do what you will," what would a Wiccan do if they came across a situation where they were in a dilemma where what they felt it was necessary for them to do, they knew was going to cause some sort of harm? For example, I'm in a relationship, and well, this is just an example. Say I'm in a relationship with someone who is very abusive, physically, mentally, however, and I know that I have to get out of this relationship, but if I were to get out of the relationship, it's going to cause harm to maybe the children I have, not, like mental harm because now I'm leaving their father, or it's going to cause mental harm to the person that I'm leaving, or maybe it's not even an abusive relationship, but it's a relationship that I can no longer stay in for my own overall well-being. And I know when I break up with this person, it's going to cause them harm, heartbreak, mental anguish. What would the Wiccan then do because they know they're going to break the Rede?
Well, another thing, and I probably should have prefaced this before, is first of all, my interpretation of Wicca is very individualistic. I honestly believe that it is about finding your path. It is about finding your beliefs. It is about exploring and knowing oneself. That is how I interpret it, and that's the way that I look at Wicca. I think it is a very individualistic thing. Even though it's supposed to be quote-unquote organized, it's not organized. Everyone has basically their own, they have their own way of interpreting things, looking at things, and that's just the way it is. And I think that that's how it should be. So let me just share my understanding of the Wiccan Rede. When I was told the Wiccan Rede, and when I learned how to create spells and to do things like that, I was told to understand that if you throw a rock into a pond, ripples are going to expand outward, and they are going to affect the surrounding area. That is the same, huh?
Cause and effect.
Right, exactly. So that is the same way. So understanding that if you are going to do something that is going to cause an effect, it is somehow going to change whatever, it is going to have an effect. And this effect is going to ripple out, and it is going to influence other things. So that's the way that I was taught to look at the Wiccan Rede, is to understand that what you want to do is you want to be able to accomplish whatever it is, whatever your goal is, and cause the least amount of negative effect. And that is it. And sometimes you have to cause a negative effect. There's no reason why you have to be a passive person who runs around letting people walk all over you, letting abusive boyfriends or girlfriends be in your life. There's no reason for that. If there's any way to change that situation, explore all of those options. And if one of those options means doing a spell against somebody or doing a spell to get yourself out of that situation, there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. So I think that it's kind of, I think we just get stuck in like just taking things so literally and looking at things like it's black and white. It's not. There's ways of looking at things, but there's also, I think there's a certain sense of responsibility. Well, I was actually going to move away from this topic. So,
Okay,
is there anything else you wanted to say about this?
I was going to say that, yeah, I agree. And I think even the idea of causing the least negative effects on things can even be subjective, depending on the person. Because I certainly agree that Wicca, or the practice of Wicca, is very personal. I've always said that when it comes down to the Rede, it really comes, the basis is between you and your relationship to your gods or deity. Nobody else can tell you what is right or wrong for you because it's very subjective. You know, I mean, if you are in, I mean, from the outside perspective, if someone didn't know the depths of that relationship that I was in, maybe to them, my husband / boyfriend, whoever that person is with me, looks like Prince Charming, and he looks like he self-sacrifices, and oh my God, CricketSong, why do you feel the need to tear his children away from him? Because you don't live with him. You don't know the true interactions that we have, and maybe it's important for me to do a spell that's going to cause him harm in order for me to get away. But from someone else's perspective, it looks like I'm just out to get him, and I'm a bitch, and he's the best thing that ever happened to me.
Right.
You know?
Yeah. And just, there are people who practice Wicca who are atheists too. They don't have a belief in, the deities or gods. So I'm just throwing that out there.
Okay.
But like one of the things, like everybody's familiar with the Raymond Buckland article that came out, and people were very reactionary to it. And this was a time, there was a couple of events that people had posted about doing these mass spells for things.
Right.
And one of them was to do a mass spell against this rapist who was charged with rape and then didn't get a very long sentence. He didn't even get the minimum sentence, and people were upset about that, and they wanted to do a spell for it. So one of the things that, And then Raymond Buckland was reacting to that, and he was talking about back in his day, and how he worked so hard for all for witches' rights and all this stuff, and it makes us look bad. There's to a certain extent, I kind of agree with him in the aspect of it. Whenever I hear anybody who's going to do a curse or hex against someone, I always think to myself, they don't believe in magic. And the reason why I say this is because if you actually believed in magic and believed in spell work, you would understand that whatever you do is actually going to affect the world around you. And for those of us who have seen magic manifest and understand that spells do what they're supposed to do, we understand that, wow, okay, so this means that whatever I do has an effect on the world. I actually have to be responsible for it, and I have to understand that what I do is going to have an effect. And this, again, it's kind of like what I believe is behind the Wiccan Rede. There are ways to cause effects and cause change to occur and cause the least amount of harm. And sometimes, I'm not going to say any names, but sometimes I watch people and they're talking about magic and they're talking about how they perform magic, and I look at what they're doing and I'm looking at I'm looking at the effect, or what the effect is they want, and then I'm looking at the cause to achieve that effect, and I'm thinking to myself, I don't see how that's going to work. Those two things are different. There's there's contagious magic and there's sympathetic magic. There's the idea that if you put nails in hair and a puppet or something like that, you are creating something that is a representation for something else. Then there is the idea that there's sort of like this microcosm that you can create, and you change in the microcosm and it has an effect on the macrocosm. And some of the things that I see them do and what they're actually trying to accomplish, I don't see how those two things connect. So how come I'm getting...
Yeah,
am I getting feedback on your end?
Feedback, yeah. I would even, suggest that when we're talking about that cause and effect thing, the way I even look at it, and I totally get where you're coming from. I wrote a blog post about something very similar just the other day, because I had come across a YouTube video, and I'm not going to name names either, but I'm like, you make no sense to me. Don't you understand how magic works? The idea of getting yourself, at least this is how I prepare to do my magic, to align myself with the intention. So if my intention is to, if it were to hex, curse, if it was to do a malicious spell, to curse someone, then to prepare myself to be aligned with that magical intention, that manifestation, I would align myself with the vibration of that intention. I want to be one with that so that I send forth that. And in order to be in that place, I would have to get myself into that sort of negative, low-level vibrational energy that I don't want to be in, because I've taken all this time and energy to get my life in the vibration of where I am, and I'm building a momentum to get even more of what I'm looking for. And that's in complete contradiction to cursing someone. So, when I think of it that way, if I'm trying to build momentum to bring forth more of the things that I want, sending out those intentions, the stones in the pool to ripple, to bring, I'm the center of all this, prosperity or abundance or love or joy or whatever it is that I'm working on, I don't want to be sending out like a contradicting intention. At least that's how I work, Right,
yeah. So the way I interpret what you just said is sympathetic magic. So that's kind of the idea that whatever you send out is what you get back. Sort
Mm-hmm.
of, it's that law of, or is it attraction magic?
It's like,
It's kind of like the law of attraction.
yeah,
And
contagion, law of attraction, sympathetic. That's
yeah.
the way I sort of work in my life, in my everyday life. You know, I mean, not to say that I haven't done banishings, which I tend to do more than cursings, because it's an easier route for me to get. I guess I don't know. I love people. I don't want to hurt people. You know, in general, it doesn't mean I don't have the capacity to do that, but I generally just don't feel a drive towards that. You know?
Yeah.
I don't know.
And yeah, I mean there's also the axiom, you know, I mean the four corners of the witch's pyramid, or which actually comes from Eliphas Levi's. I think it was it probably even comes before Eliphas Levi, but he described it as the four magic,
the pillars of magic, or the magus. Yeah.
Yeah, it's like the four powers of the magi.
Yeah.
It's representative, but now people have called it the witch's pyramid. They even added a fifth one to it.
Yeah.
But those are, you know, to dare, to know, to will, and to be silent.
Mm-hmm.
And that is the other one that is very important. And there's superstitions around that being silent. But it's one of those things that you want to do, is to also be silent about things, about, you know, spell work and stuff like that. And I think that is it's a very important axiom to follow, and I think there's several reasons for that. And you know, that is one of the things that I definitely try to remember, is to be silent about things. And I forgot exactly where I was going with this.
Well, I was just going to add, I think it's really important. I mean, when, I don't know, I mean, the to be silent concept, my husband, who would not identify as a witch, but he's definitely a magical practitioner. We talk about it all the time, not about spell crafting, but we talk about the idea of, you know, if you have something that you have full confidence in and you want to see it manifest, and you're either doing the working or you've done the working and you're waiting for the manifestation, to start talking about it and to hear other people's opinions may, in fact, influence your own belief in your own thing, even if, you know, you don't think it's affected you. So, you know, say I'm sharing with you guys, you know, I just did this great prosperity spell, and oh my God, I did this, and then you're like, well, you know, CricketSong, that's really strange, because if I was doing it, I would have done. And even if I have full confidence in what I have done, there may be a little nagging thing that says, well, maybe the way Lailoken did it might have been better. So why would you want to sort of self-sabotage yourself in that way? Why would you want to put up obstacles or restraints so that then your magic or your manifestation may have a more difficult time getting to you if magic takes the path of least resistance?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
You know?
Right. Yeah. And absolutely. I think that's a valid point. Is that you also don't want to, you know, discharge it or take away from it by talking about it.
Yeah.
And the other thing is that, you know, it's also a psychological effect that you can have on other people. And this is one thing that, in my opinion, low magic people do, is they use psychological manipulation of other people. You know, it's kind of like this sort of spooky-ish atmosphere. But one of them is you don't want to talk about it around other people, because they may feel like, oh, well, if he can do spells for this, he can do a spell against me. Then if you ever get into a conflict with that person, it can have adverse psychological effects on them, you know. And even there's a lot of people who are just absolutely paranoid out there, you know. And if they believe that you are somebody who's going to do magic against them, you know, they can get scared by it. And, you know, there's been studies done where people are affected by, they call it the placebo effect.
Yes.
You know, where you could tell somebody that you know, they're going to have something happen to them, and they cause it to actually happen to themselves.
Yes.
There was a guy named Michael Harner. I think maybe we've talked about this before, but pointing a bone at someone in their culture, that causes them to die. And they will go into cardiac arrest, and they will actually have they will manifest it in their being.
Yeah.
And
Well,
it
isn't
is
that magic?
yes, but it's more psychological on the part of that person.
Right.
See what I'm saying?
But
If they
what I'm
didn't
saying, what
believe
I'm
that,
suggesting, but right, isn't belief a big part of magic? I'm not saying that the person who pointed the bone actually did the magic. The person who goes into that cardiac arrest and manifests what they believe to be what the consequence of that is, they've manipulated their own energies. They've created a change within them, but was influenced by that person who did that.
It kind of reminds
I see
me
what you're
of
saying.
something, of a quote from True Blood, where I know, and I'm not going to quote it quite right, but I watched the first season repeatedly, so I remember it. Bill is telling Sookie that she's like, well, what makes you alive, basically? And he says magic, and she scoffs at it, and he's like, well, isn't it magic that makes your heart beat and your blood flow and you be alive? That's very much what comes to mind when you kind of describe that.
Yeah.
You can bring it down to a very base level, but then it's like, well, then where do you go from there?
Well, that even reminds me of when I was a Christian and I was doing Bible studies and stuff. But the whole idea of the breath of life that is talked about in the Bible, that God breathed, the breath of life into Adam, that is what you were talking about. And that's what I'm saying. At least for me, magic is that energy. I mean, it's the thing, the power, the unseen power that keeps everything moving and alive. And the fact that we have this belief, whether you identify as a witch or whether you are part of a culture that you have this belief that these maybe superstitions or things that have been passed down in your culture that you truly believe in, you can manifest. You can create these changes within you.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, then there's psychological triggers, like people who, like let's say you're a professional baseball player, and you have a set of superstitions that you do before every single game.
Yeah.
And what this does is it essentially psychs you out to perform your best.
Yes.
And some people, if they get interrupted, they can't do that. It can have an adverse effect on them,
right?
Because they need those psychological triggers to be able to perform at their peak. Maybe they'll have a bad game that day or whatever.
Exactly.
And it's one of the things that, as a magical practitioner, you also want to develop, is to be able to get yourself in a certain state. And it's kind of like a psychological trigger, so that if you need to do something, you can put yourself in a state to be able to do that.
Right.
And that's definitely an important thing too.
The thing that you were talking about the man with the heart attack, you mentioned something about people, creating things happening to themselves. I've had more than one client come for a reading believing that they were cursed, and it was something that they have actually created. They believed it to begin with, and then they started compounding that belief. So things that were happening in their life was actually a self-cursing condition, Yeah. We do have a question.
Oh, okay.
Sarah K. asked or said, to me it means do what is needed to be done, coming from a positive intent. To me it means to check yourself, a reminder, not really a rule. I believe she's talking about the read. I think it can be seen as a rule, but to me it's not at all. Yes, she said. So actually, going back to the read, the situation that I had said, and I know you went into the explanation that it's a very personal situation. So what do you believe someone should do if they identify as Wiccan and they're trying to live their life as a Wiccan, where they find themselves in a situation where they know what they need to do for their overall well-being, is going to cause harm. How do they determine, do you think they should determine whether they should carry forth that or not?
I think they should do what they think is best.
But how would they know that? How would they know that? I mean,
Good instinct.
instinct?
I mean, honestly, it's. I agree with Sarah Kay about that. It's doing the least amount of harm. The other thing is that it's also, if you're walking down the street and somebody does something that pisses you off, are you going to pull out a gun and shoot them? If your answer is no, then if you are in a situation where you need to change the situation, are you actually going to like do a hex to kill someone, or are you going to actually do something to get out of the situation? You know, your reaction should be equal to whatever it is, the action that you want to accomplish, in my opinion. But as for who, I mean, you really have to determine for yourself. I mean, it's, you know, the responsibility is going to fall onto you. And I had two situations in my life where I had done something to affect someone else, and the first time it's not what I want to happen, and the second time I regretted it. It was something that I feel I should not have done, and I to this day regret it.
Mm.
And that is something that I have to understand, that there's a very strong possibility that that was my responsibility.
Right.
And you know, that's just the way it is. And another thing that kind of upsets me whenever I see people talking about bindings or whatever, it's like, that's not the only thing you can do. You know, it's, and also bindings in themselves can be very disruptive and very dangerous, and essentially cause someone to become stagnant and not change. And if you are trying to change someone, or give them the ability to change and grow, and you bind them, that essentially is, it's causing them to freeze and to not be able to change and grow. And creativity is definitely a very strong part of magic. You know, if every situation in your life is a nail, then you're going to always pull out that hammer to fix it. And magic is more than just doing, you know, like 2 or 3 spells. There's whatever situation is going on, there's always a creative way to fix it.
Right.
And sometimes it's not just binding or hexing someone.
Right.
So I don't know if that answers your question.
It does, because I was just, you know, when I'm asked that sort of question, because I agree. I feel like sometimes people come into Wicca from whatever they were practicing before, whatever religion or spiritual path that they were on. Especially I find when it's someone coming from a Christian background, because they're so used to black and white. This is right, this is wrong. When they come into something more personal like Wicca, they're looking for a right and a wrong. So this is always right and this is always wrong. Harm none, harm none, harm none. It's not harm none. I mean, I feel like it's very gray, as you pointed out before. Sometimes, you know, the surgeon has to harm in order to find or to heal. Sometimes there are situations that happens, and if I'm put in a situation where I know my actions are going to cause harm in some aspect, that I need to decide which is the best choice for me, which will cause the least amount of distress or destruction, and I'm okay with. And I'm going to be okay with any of the consequences that come from that. And I think it comes down to your own personal morals and ethics and your conscience and what you're willing to do and willing not to do. I don't think anybody can tell you, you know, I mean, granted, we have the laws of the lands that we live in, but and there's consequences for the actions that we do, but when it comes to your own personal life, in your own interactions with the people that are close to you and the situations that affect you, I think You know, you're in control of it.
Mm-hmm. And also I believe that humans inherently have morals, unless you're a sociopath, you know.
Even sociopaths have morals. It just may not be the norm.
Right. Yeah.
So
yeah. So I mean, it's kind of like we have these innate things. We know that, you know, if there's somebody who's holding a whole bunch of stuff and they're trying to get through a door, and you're right next to the door, chances are you're probably going to open it for them. You know, it's just the way. It's just we think that way. We think of other people all the time. You know, and I think that that's just kind of it's ingrained in us. It's part of our evolution. Our social evolution. We just think of other people. We put ourselves in other people's shoes.
I think most people do, but I have had interactions with, and my daughter is one of them, where whether it's a learning disability or whether it's a condition,
Air quote.
Yes, I have. She does not pick up on the same social cues that her brother would. So with that example, you said someone with a whole bunch of things and they're trying to get through a door. She honestly does not see that. She does not understand that, oh my gosh, I should open the door for mommy. And I feel like that there are some, and I'm not saying that like they don't have morals and ethics, but like Tara pointed out, it's different. And I believe she, on the flip side, when she sees someone crying, she's the first one to comfort them. So there's certain things I think that we each, I don't know if it's generation, I don't know. But I have encountered people that they're
very much impactful on that.
That what?
The age.
Age.
Very significant on growth of moral compasses and whatnot.
And I guess I would include not just physical age, maybe emotional age, maturity, maybe. Mm-hmm. Because I can think of my son at the same age, and he would have opened the door. So, I mean, you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Well, I think it's hard to paint everybody as the same. Everybody's different. I'm just saying that I think that I think my point was that for the norm, I think the norm is that we think of other people.
Okay.
That's just now if you put 100 people into that test, 25%, 25 of them might not do it. Yeah. One of them might actually trip the person. I mean,
yeah, I know. Huh?
You know what I mean? But I think for the most part, I think that the majority of the people are thinking outside of themselves, and I think that's kind of like how I look at morals and ethics.
Yeah. So what time is it? All right, so we still have plenty of time. Let's see. Sarah K said, let's see, she's got a couple of things. I'd say it's all that person. What are that person's standards? And I feel like shadow work is so important. By working within, it will affect your craft and your perception in general. And she said, nice example from True Blood. Or Isis gave Osiris the breath of life. Whatever we focus grows. Yeah. Okay.
Yep.
Go ahead.
I'm just going to say one thing about shadow work is that if you're doing shadow work by yourself without the aid of a counselor or a psychologist, you're not doing shadow work.
I disagree. But again, I have a psychology degree. So. Okay.
All right.
Yeah, and I know I could see both perspectives. And I'll throw myself here as an example. Things have been going on in my life in the last few months that have required me to take a moment and really delve into myself and ask myself, why do I feel this way? Why do I act this way? Why do I what are my motives for this, and sort of trying to find out answers for certain behaviors or certain feelings that in the past I would have just sort of denied or ignored. And I feel like that's shadow work. But I also think that if the situation that I'm going through or the things that are happening in my life, if I can't come to some conclusion and I still feel lost or I still feel hopeless or I still feel like the answers are still not there, I feel like at that point then working with someone else, a therapist or whatever, would be beneficial for me to be able to work through it. But I almost think, like everything, there's levels of shadow work that people can do on their own, but then when you get to real deep things that you can't seem to navigate, you may need the help of someone else. Mm-hmm. That's my perspective of the shadow work situation.
And sometimes it doesn't even have to be like a therapist or a psychologist, because I myself I'm also going through some issues. And there's been one friend who I've just been talking to nonstop and just verbal vomit, and they're a great sounding board, and they're actually listening. They're not just trying to give like feedback, but they're listening. And then when I'm like, okay, does that make sense? And can you give me your opinion? Then they give me a perspective I may not have had, and then I can deal with my issues better. And I've been to therapy in my younger years, so I know all that shit.
Well, I guess I should have said, for myself personally, shadow work involves, there's no way I can do it on my own.
Yeah.
And that's perfectly fine.
That's just me, I guess. That's just me.
I think, and like I said, I think it depends on the level of the shit that you're dealing with, you know? Right. I mean, if you're dealing with the fact that every time I see my ex-husband, he makes me furious, I think that's something, at least for me, that I could try to work out on my own, you know, working through why I feel that way. And I might get to a point where I just can't get any deeper, and it would benefit me overall to talk to someone who maybe can help me get beyond that wall or the resistance that I've created to protect myself, you know?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Because I know I think it's the person, the level, and how willing and open you are able to be with yourself. Because I've also met people who are just, they honestly, when I'm talking with them and I'm like, you know, why do you feel that way though? They honestly do not know. And there's just something within them that won't let them go beyond and to me it seems obvious. Do you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Mm.
Okay, so Sarah, I think it depends on who you incorporate into that shadow work. My husband helps me greatly, but a counselor can help as well. I agree. And she said, going back to the example of the woman separating from her husband and the effect on the children, but what outcome would be worse? Mom being in pain and the children having long-term damage or pain that is caused by change and adjusting to something new.
Yeah, good point. Yeah.
So, threefold law. You talked about the ripple effect. You talked about, you know, making a change and how it ripples. What's the deal with this threefold law thing that they're always talking about?
So the threefold law too. The history behind the threefold law, to my understanding, there's two sources of how the threefold law came about that I've heard. The first one is that there's a ritual in the gardenering craft where something is done 3 times, and it became kind of like a threefold law. Then the other part is that there was something that there was actually something written that, you know, you're supposed to do. Something was supposed to come back to you 3 times. But these were just kind of things that were written, and it kind of caught on. And because 3s come up, especially in mythology, all the time, especially Celtic mythology, I think even Norse mythology, probably some other mythologies that I'm not that familiar with, 3s come up, you know. And so I think it kind of caught on, and people started talking about the threefold rule or the threefold law. What you send out to the universe comes back to you 3 times. Now, anybody who thinks about that, it's like, why would it come back exactly 3 times? That doesn't make any sense to me. And that it's kind of it's like karma. It's understanding how what you do, again, those ripples that you send out to the universe are going to possibly come back around to you. And there's also like the effects of what you do you can live with for the rest of your life, or you can or maybe it does come back to you as karma. So I think that the threefold law is another thing that people, first of all, it's not a threefold law. It's just kind of a concept that caught on, and just looking back at the history of how Wicca has evolved, it's just kind of like after the 1990s, it's just kind of like it exploded, and all these authors started writing all these books on Wicca, and it just kind of blew out of proportion, and they started kind of creating their own form of Wicca, and the threefold law is one of those things got thrown in there. And it's that's how I interpret the quote unquote threefold law.
Yeah.
I think it's just a way of understanding that what you put out there can come back to you.
Yeah, I agree. When I was doing research a long time ago, I came across the High Magician's Aid and the reference to the threefold law within there. And then it was, I think Doreen Valiente might have written something that, was it the Rede that incorporated, her poem on the Rede that incorporated it?
Yeah,
and
Doreen.
Those two kind of combined the idea of this law. Yeah.
Well, actually, Doreen was very much, from my understanding, was very much opposed to that threefold law. She did not like it at all, that it had caught on. And I think Gardner at the time, there was a conference that Doreen spoke to. I'm just going by memory here.
Yeah.
But she was very much kind of, she didn't agree with it. She didn't like the idea of it. She didn't like the concept of it.
Right.
But again, it kind of caught on.
What I mean was it 3 times what you put out, 3 times bad, 3 times good? Wasn't it in that? There's a poem or something that it was included in, and people just kind of like grabbed onto that, grabbed onto this, and said, "Aha! That's what it is. It's the law."
Yeah, was it a poem by her?
3 times bad, and but I can't.
I think that was a poem that was written by a lady named Gwen.
Was it Lady Gwen?
And it was, and it was it was printed in the Green Egg magazine.
Okay. Yeah, I think wasn't it like it was a read of Wicca. It was similar.
Right.
To what Doreen? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, like you're supposed to kiss the moon 3 times, and then there's all these woods and all these things. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I mean, but again, I think it's just kind of, I think when Wicca really began to kind of catch on in society, it kind of took on its own life, and people started writing books on it and incorporating other things, and then they had the American Council of Witches, who came up with the 13 principles, and then the 13 principles got thrown in there. But I just don't I don't yeah, I don't know. I just I just never understood exactly 3 times over.
I never understood it either. Yeah. And for a while, when I was brandy new, years and years ago, and I was trying to learn without really someone to explain things to me, how I rationalized it in my head, I said, okay, well, I'm going to take the 3, and I recognize that 3 was a sacred number. I mean, in Catholicism, it was the Holy Trinity. So the idea that the triangle being the strongest geometrical shape, and all this made sense to me, that 3 had some sort of, energetic principle within itself. I said, okay, so if I'm doing something, I'm going to understand that, what, I will reap what I sow, but it will affect me body, mind, and spirit. I'm not just going to get, if I feel bad about what I did, I'll have a physical manifestation in my body. I'll feel nauseous, and my mind won't let it go. And that's how I rationalize the three.
I like that. I like that. Yeah.
Because otherwise, it made no sense to me. I smack you, you're going to smack me 3 times? Yeah, go ahead, try, kind of thing, you know?
Right. Yeah. Yeah, I kind of like that concept of mind. Would you say mind, body, and spirit?
And spirit. Yeah. It just
like
it made that was the only way I could make any sense of someone telling me that it's coming back 3 times. That's the law.
Rationalize it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, really?
Exactly.
Really? I don't get that.
Yeah, it's funny. It's I don't know if you've seen the last video I did. The last video I did was a public service announcement why I left Wicca.
I loved it. I laughed so hard. And then I read the comments that people left you. I was like, what? Did you guys miss the point? I don't know.
I don't know. I thought most people understood it. But the funniest thing was, because I went and I watched there's like several videos where people had posted up about why they left Wicca. And for the most part, a lot of the reasons why they left Wicca, or they thought Wicca was just kind of silly, was all of these rules that kind of got thrown into Wicca. And it wasn't originally, what traditional craft had in it. This was all stuff that was piled onto it. And so that was one of the things I just thought that was so funny, that all these things that people get upset about Wicca is not Wicca. It's all the stuff that's kind of like been piled onto it.
Right. And you know what really, really irks me, and I guess maybe I should consider why it irks me. But whenever, not every time, I guess, maybe it was, I don't know, when I first came onto YouTube, maybe years ago, when I said I was a non-traditional Wiccan, someone who didn't follow a specific, I didn't use the term eclectic because, whatever, non-traditional. I don't form a tradition. I don't claim a lineage, but I identify as Wiccan. Oh, love and light, love and light. And I'm like, just because I identify as Wiccan doesn't mean that I'm altruistic. It doesn't mean I'm self-sacrificing all the time. It doesn't mean that I'm a doormat. It doesn't mean that if you punch me, I'm not going to punch you back. That's at least not the Wicca that I understand. That there's a balance. That I'm not all fluffy, glittery unicorns, rainbows out of my ass. I mean, I may swear, and there may be a time that there is harm that I need to cause. I'm not a pacifist, but I'm not out to get you either, I guess. The fact that some people that I have run into think that Wicca equals altruistic, light, love all the time. Glenda, the what is it, Witch of the North?
Glenda,
Yes.
the Good Witch of the North? Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. That's not the Wicca, at least, that I practice, I strive for a balance.
Exactly, and I think that that's one of the things that definitely I see in Wicca is definitely this balance, and I absolutely agree. I think that if you are on the one spectrum where you're just just completely head in the clouds, letting people walk all over you, and just like I'll just love them till they love me back. That's the one extreme, and then the other extreme is the person who's just like fuck them all. I'm going to kill everybody. Screw you, I'm going to take everything I want. And you have these polar opposites. And actually what you want to do is be somewhere in the middle.
Yeah.
If somebody deserves your respect and your love, then give it to them. If they haven't earned it, why keep them in your life?
Right.
And I think that is one of the things that definitely if you look at the charge of the goddess in Wicca, there's a lot of that balance. There's mirth and reverence.
Yes.
There's the balance of those things, and of course now I can't remember the other ones, but that's the way it is. And if you look at the tools, there's a balance between the feminine and the masculine. It's full of nothing but balance, and I think that that's what it is. And coming back to the old axiom of to know thyself is you want to know yourself. And knowing oneself is knowing your insecurities, knowing your fears, knowing your things that you don't want other people to know. I mean, there are aspects of yourself, the dark crevices in the corners of your mind that you want to explore, and those parts of yourself are not always, you know, that sexy darkness.
Right.
It's actually some ugly
Yes.
mush crap that you just kind of have to mush through and get through and to understand yourself better. But once you do understand it, you become a more balanced person.
Exactly, and I think it really adds to your personal power as a person, as a spiritual being, as a witch, when you understand your own limitations and your own strengths and your own nastiness and your own beauty. I think it gives you access to more energy to make the changes that you want to change in your life.
Definitely.
Sarah says she agrees, and making those assumptions about Wicca to me is lack of research. I agree, Wicca is not all about pink fluffy bunnies. Yes.
Pink fluffy bunnies. Yeah.
And glitter and unicorns and fairies and I don't know.
I think most of that came up when I think maybe when Teen Witch was written.
Oh, really?
I think that's just kind of like what I'm guessing, because it was so much geared towards kids and them doing magic and all that stuff, and so I think that's.
I never read it. Did you read Teen Witch, Tara? No, I never read it either.
I read it.
Did you?
Yeah, I've read actually several of Silver Ravenwolf's books.
Yeah, I read a couple.
Yeah, I mean, Teen Witch, I did an analysis of it, comparing it to the, some of the published material that Doreen put out there, that the Ferrars had, that they put in their book, and her text is pretty similar to the original text. So, I mean, I was impressed by that.
Yeah.
Even though I don't like the bow that it was wrapped in, at least the package was fairly accurate.
That's good. That's actually, I guess for me, I remember the first book I read, because I had recently left Christianity and I still had a fondness for some of the teachings. The first book I read of hers really was bashing. It was like every other sentence was, and that's why the Christians, and that's why the Christians. And it was just left a very sour taste in my mouth.
Because she was bashing Christians?
Yeah. I was looking for, because I had come from Christianity that was bashing everyone else because they were all wrong and from Satan, to something that was a little more embracing of other spiritual paths. And I thought at that time that Wicca was what I was looking for in conversations that I had with people who were or identified as Wiccan, or who were as forthcoming as they could because they were in a traditional coven, that I said, well, this might be something that I really should investigate. In one of her books, I can't even remember what one it was, it really made me uncomfortable. But then someone else had given me something, the Crystal Chalice Well, I don't remember. It was an older book, and I read that one, and I was like, oh, okay, this is better.
Yeah, I mean, obviously I do a lot of videos on Christians, but honestly, the only thing that bothers me about Christians is when they start attacking witches and other people's beliefs. Right. And that's the only. Other than that, I mean, I've worked with Christians here in San Francisco in the Tenderloin, and they do a lot of good work for the community. Mm-hmm. I have a great deal of respect for them. The minute that they start telling me that my religion is satanic and all this stuff, then I'll adamantly disagree with them, and I'll point it out to them.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that about wraps it up. I know we started late, but we're now ending a little late. So thank you, everyone. We still have a bunch of viewers. Thank you for being part of our audience. It was great. And Sarah, thank you for comments and questions.
Yes, good questions.
Yeah. Next week we have the Deviant Witches, Michael and Melissa, joining us. And I believe we're going to talk about God forms and possession next week. Actually, we don't have a show next week. Yes, we do have a show next week. It's the week after that we don't have a show because I will be on vacation. So yes, we have a show next week, but the following week we will not. I guess that's
Okay, you're gonna have to remind me again, of course.
I will remind you.
I have short-term memory, so.
Yes, next week is the Deviant Witches. The following week I will be in New Hampshire with no internet access whatsoever, enjoying time with my family in a cabin in the woods.
Nice.
Yes. So thank you, Lailoken, for joining us. It's always a pleasure to talk with you.
Thank you, Lunar Wisdom and Tara. I really enjoy it. Thank you so much.
Yay. And we'll see you next week, all. Love you.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye.